Kayla Morrow never imagined her everyday life in the Ashlands would be shattered by something so unpredictable. Shadow storms were always around, a constant reminder of what was left of a once great world. Her daily grind was all about survival, doing everything she could to keep it together while fragments of memories never seemed to fit. It was like something was missing, like the very air itself was corrupted. But none of that could have prepared Kayla for what was coming next. The Heart Flame relic, something she'd found without knowing its significance, suddenly flared in front of her eyes, a sign of ancient light, something she could never understand. With that sign, something inside Kayla ignited, something deep in her chest, like a flame that had finally woken up from silence. But that flame also drew the attention of forces she couldn't comprehend. Shadow hunters, masked and twisted figures, and delirious seers appeared out of nowhere, all drawn to the relic. It was the first time Kayla was running from something, or rather, from herself. The feeling of being chased by something unknown took over her, and with it, her survival instincts kicked in more fiercely than ever. She ran, not knowing where to, just away from everything familiar. When she had no idea what to do next, a meeting with a strange man, the blind warrior Cyrus Vane, changed the course of her life. He looked at her with a perception she couldn't understand. "The light chose you, Kayla," he said in a calm that was downright creepy. "Even the stars hide their true meaning, but you're more than you realize." Cyrus's words were like an echo in her mind, making her question everything she thought she knew about herself. How did he know her name? And what did it mean to be chosen by the light? Doubt and fear mixed with a desperate need for answers. What she was carrying wasn't just a relic. It was the beginning of something massive, something she wasn't ready to understand but couldn't avoid anymore. Cyrus, with his quiet wisdom, explained that the Heart Flame relic wasn't just some artifact. It was the key to a lost legacy, something the dark forces desperately wanted to destroy. But why me? Kayla asked, still feeling like she was stuck in the middle of a nightmare. The blind warrior gave a slight smile, like he'd been waiting for this question, like he knew it was coming. Because the rebirth starts with you, Kayla. Darkness has to be faced, but the real battle is inside you. The awakening you feel is more than just a vision of a new tomorrow. It's the rebuilding of a destiny that was erased. Those words stuck with her as she kept running. The truth was starting to unfold, and Kayla knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She didn't know exactly what it was, but her mission was becoming clearer by the minute. She wasn't just running from hunters or creatures chasing her. She was running from a legacy she didn't yet understand. And at the same time, she was being pulled towards a light that had chosen her, towards an awakening that was making her more than just a survivor. She was now carrying an ancient power, one that was slowly starting to manifest. But what was it really? What did it mean to be the chosen of the light? Cyrus had given her hints, but the real answer was still beyond the horizon, in a future that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. While fleeing, Kayla began to reflect on what else was at stake. It wasn't just about her survival anymore, but something bigger. The darkness consuming the Ashlands was just a reflection of something much deeper, something she needed to face, whatever it was. But was she ready for that? The rebirth was right in front of her, but so was the weight of a legacy she couldn't ignore. It was the fate of a world falling apart, and no matter how hard she tried to resist, she was starting to realize she was part of it. The awakening wasn't just hers. It was the world's. Now, with the relic in her hands, Kayla knew her life would never be the same. She no longer had the luxury of ignoring what was coming. She had to keep going. But what would she do when she finally found the answers? The future was starting to unfold, but Kayla had no idea which path to take. Fear and courage battled inside her, and she felt like the only option was to move forward. Even without fully understanding, even with doubts and uncertainties. Her destiny's reconstruction had begun, and there was no turning back. Now, in a world torn apart by shadows, she was the only one who could light a flame of hope, the only one who could face the void. But with each step, she felt the weight of the responsibility she carried. And with every choice, one question hung in the air. What was she willing to sacrifice to restore balance? The rebirth was within her reach, but the road to it was long and full of dangers. The next step would be crucial. What would Kayla do when the future finally stood before her? The answers were getting closer, but the cost could be more than she could bear. As she walked into the unknown, an urgency wrapped around her. The awakening was happening, and with it, the promise of an uncertain future. where only those brave enough to fight the shadows could have a shot at rebuilding what was lost. Kayla's flight was like a scream into the void, an echo of fear reverberating through the ruins of a forgotten world. Every step she took seemed to sink deeper into the darkness, like the very ground beneath her feet was trying to swallow her up. The storm of shadows seemed to chase her every move. She could feel it, an oppressive presence that grew with every breath. But she couldn't stop. Not now. The relic she was carrying burned in her hand, glowing with a light that felt like a faint flame against the growing darkness. And deep down she knew there was nowhere to run. It was like everything had been destined for her, even though she didn't know why. That's when the shadows took form. Twisted creatures, born from pain and fear, rose from the ruins like a dark wave. Their shapes were impossible to make out, a mix of nightmares and anguish. Kayla felt panic rush through her veins, but she didn't have time to hesitate. Instinct kicked in, pushing her to run faster, deeper, towards what seemed like a tear in the very fabric of the world. But fear wasn't the only enemy she'd have to face that night. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed beside her, and Kayla turned, surprised, to see a hooded figure moving through the gloom. She wasn't alone. Arian Dax, a mercenary who had been following her without her knowing, appeared, sword in hand and a face hard as steel. At first, Kayla saw her as a threat, a potential traitor, but something in Arian's eyes made her trust her. Something had changed. And now the battle against the shadows seemed more human. "We're not as different as we think, girl," Arian said, almost whispering, her tone free from any bitterness. "The relic you carry? It's something everyone fears." But soon the fear was gone from Arian's eyes. "Come on. There's more at stake than you realize." Together they marched through the night, facing more creatures and crossing cursed ruins. Kayla was on edge, her mind drowning in questions, with no answers for what she was about to face. She didn't understand the weight of the relic she carried, but she felt she had no choice but to keep moving forward. Arian explained that what Kayla possessed, the key to a new beginning, was hidden in a temple lost deep in the ruins of a city long forgotten. They had to get there before the shadows caught up with them. The temple was buried under mountains of rubble, a fortress that felt hollow, like a monument to the decay of the world. But when she touched it, Kayla felt the energy of something bigger spreading through her hands. The vision hit her fast and hard. The eternal eclipse appeared before her eyes, a darkness that swallowed everything around it, as if the world was about to succumb to its own destruction. And in the middle of it all, she saw herself, alone, among the ruins of a world she'd never lived in. What did it mean? She didn't know, but the answer seemed to be right in front of her, distorted by the fog of fate. Kayla struggled to stay on her feet. But when she looked at Arian, the mercenary's words, and the weight of the vision, everything seemed to make sense. There was something inevitable about all of this. Something bigger than she could understand right now. But the pieces were starting to fall into place, and with each step, she knew the truth was closer. Maybe it was the legacy she'd been searching for, or maybe it was the awakening of something much older. The echoes of the shadows were still there, lurking. And Kayla, with Arian by her side, had no choice but to keep going. The journey was just beginning, and the price for this discovery was still uncertain. But she knew in her heart that she would face the darkness head-on, even if it meant facing truths she wasn't ready to understand. The path ahead seemed endless, and the questions multiplied with every passing second. Who were the real enemies? What was she really carrying? What was this relic? Every answer seemed to bring new questions, and the uncertainty wrapped around her like a cold cloak. But with Arian, she no longer felt alone. And so, Kayla and her new companion pressed on, driven by a painful truth. The darkness that surrounded them only fed on what they still didn't know. The wind cut across the barren hills with an unexpected force, as if the very winds of fate had turned into conscious beings, blowing in random directions. Kayla and Arian walked side by side, their shadows cast on the uneven, harsh ground of the ancient road. The ruins around them, quieter than ever, watched them with a chilling stillness. The relic, still hanging from Kayla's neck, pulsed with a lifelike energy as if it was calling for something. Maybe for something she still didn't understand. "It's weird, huh?" Arian spoke, breaking the silence. "How the land still feels the presence of the fallen gods." The mercenary lightly touched a broken stone beside the road, as if trying to capture the sensation of something lost deep in history. "It's not just a matter of the past. They're still here, somewhere, waiting to be discovered." Kayla looked at the mercenary, her face marked by exhaustion and growing doubt. Fallen gods? She repeated, trying to hold on to the idea, as if it was a reasonable explanation for what they were experiencing. Arian smiled softly, a contrast to her usually stern demeanor. Yeah, Kayla. Fallen gods. Or maybe, something beyond that. A long time ago, this land was ruled by immortal beings, whose powers were beyond our understanding. But what you're carrying? Arian hesitated, her gaze narrowing as she looked at Kayla's relic. That, my friend, is more than just an artifact. It's the key to something bigger, something the gods left behind before they fell. Kayla felt a chill run down her spine. She already knew her journey wasn't going to be simple, but now it seemed like they were standing in front of something much bigger than she'd ever imagined. Something buried deep in the folds of history, wrapped in mystery. Something with the power to change everything. The sky was beginning to darken, and the stars seemed to be getting closer, like they were watching with interest every move they made. That's when a distant sound reached their ears. The sound of drums echoing through the hills. It was a sound that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. A rhythmic beat that seemed to pulse in the very heart of the earth. The Sentinels of the Dawn. Arian murmured, her expression turning serious. They got here faster than I thought. The Sentinels of the Dawn, a long-forgotten secret order, were known for their connection to the ancient gods and for guarding the secrets of the Great Legacy. Rumors said they were immortal, or at least had access to some power source that made them seem that way. Kayla didn't know much about them, but she knew their presence never meant anything good. And now, hearing the drums, she felt the weight of the approaching threat. We gotta run, Arian said, already pulling Kayla by the arm, her voice full of urgency. They're not gonna let you get away that easily. The storm seemed to intensify as they ran, the sound of the drums growing louder. It was like the very world was reacting to the awakening of the power Kayla carried. Every step they took felt harder, the terrain growing more uneven and treacherous. But they couldn't stop. Not now. In the distance, a faint glow appeared, like a lonely star lighting up the darkness. Arian stopped for a moment and pointed to the far-off spot. It's over there, she said. The Temple of the Gods. The place where it all started. Where you need to go. Kayla looked in the direction she pointed, feeling the weight of the choice she was about to make. She could run, she could hide, but the truth was the temple was right there, calling her. What awaited her there? Answers or more questions? She didn't know, but she could feel that fate was guiding her to it. Let's go, Arian said, and they resumed their march with renewed determination. But time was against them. The shadows were closing in faster than they realized, and the echoes of the fallen gods resonated with every step. What would happen when they finally reached the temple? And more importantly, what would Kayla discover about herself and her role in this ancient game? As they got closer to the temple, Kayla felt the pressure of something much bigger than herself, something that went beyond her own journey. She had been chosen to carry the key, but what would this key unlock? She was about to find out. The entrance to the temple was shrouded in thick mist, like nature itself had bowed to hide what lay behind that solid stone door. Kayla and Arian reached the edge of the darkness that took over the opening, where the outlines of ancient, worn statues stood like sentinels, watching every move they made. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of mold and lost time. The relic Kayla wore around her neck began to pulse more intensely, as if it had found a force field that irresistibly pulled it in. The temple. I never thought we'd get here, Arian said, stopping for a moment before moving forward. Many failed, many fell trying to enter. But it wasn't just the temple that stopped them. It was what it was hiding. Kayla turned to Arian, the look of doubt still clear on her face. What's the temple hiding? She asked, a growing sense of danger building inside her. Something inside her knew that the truth about the temple wouldn't be easy to understand, and even harder to accept. It's a choice, Kayla, Arian replied, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. This place doesn't open by force or need. It tests the heart of whoever dares to enter. It doesn't accept just anyone. It knows if you're worthy, and it knows if you're just following a destiny that others wrote for you. Kayla clenched her fingers around the relic, feeling a wave of warmth coming from it. It was a comforting sensation, but at the same time, unsettling. What if I'm not worthy? She whispered, almost without realizing, but the doubt had already settled in her mind. So, you'll be discarded like everyone else, Arian said bluntly, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the temple. But you're not just anyone, Kayla. You've got something the others didn't, something that makes you different, something that was already written. The mercenary didn't explain further, leaving Kayla with the feeling that there was something way bigger at play than she could even understand. The truth seemed to be right there, in front of her, like a secret time refused to reveal. The temple seemed to be calling her, and Kayla couldn't turn back. Not now. They moved towards the entrance of the temple, and as they did, a wave of purple light illuminated the passage, revealing a vast inner hall filled with ancient symbols and broken altar ruins. The sound of drums that still echoed through the hills grew louder, as if they had stepped into an alternate reality, where the past and the present were merging. In the center of the room, a huge altar stood, covered in runes glowing with a cold light, like they were waiting for the right moment to activate a dormant power. Kayla felt the relic pulse harder, and a wave of dizziness hit her, like she was about to fall into an endless abyss. "This is it," Arian said, her voice low and reverent. "Here, everything will be decided." Kayla stepped forward, fear and determination mixing inside her. She knew there was no turning back. It was now or never. She placed the relic on the altar, and the moment she did, the runes began to glow intensely, lighting up the room with an ethereal shine. The ground shook, and a deep voice, sounding like it came from all directions, echoed off the ancient walls. "Choose, daughter of the fallen gods. What will become of you?" Kayla froze, the sound of the voice reverberating in her mind. The choice. What did it mean? She looked at Arian, who was unfazed, like she knew exactly what was about to happen. "I choose." Kayla began, but the words failed her. She didn't know what to choose. What did the temple want from her? What were her options? The voice continued to echo. "Choose the path of power or the path of sacrifice. One will lead to greatness, the other to redemption. One will bring the return of the gods. The other, oblivion." Kayla felt an overwhelming pressure. What should she choose? What was the right choice? Power to destroy everything that stood in her way? Or the sacrifice needed to restore balance and save the world from a dark fate? Arian once again seemed to understand what was happening. She slowly moved closer to Kayla, her expression serious. "The sacrifice might seem like a loss, but it's the only way to ensure that what's good is preserved. Power corrupts. You've seen that before. Don't let the shadows seduce you with their glow." Kayla looked at the relic, feeling an inner struggle that seemed impossible to overcome. The decision was in her hands. The temple was waiting for her answer. She knew her choice would change everything. What would she choose, Kayla? Power or sacrifice? And what would her journey be after that? The room now seemed like a scene from a twisted dream, where reality bent, and the lines between what was possible and impossible blurred. The pressure on Kayla was unbearable, but something inside her told her that this moment was bigger than her. Bigger than any force or choice. She was at a breaking point, and her decision wouldn't just define her destiny, but the destiny of everyone around her. The temple wasn't just testing her courage, but her soul. The weight of her legacy was finally clear before her. Arian stayed by her side, no rush, no words to push the decision along. She knew Kayla's time had come. The silence dragged on, broken only by the constant pulse of the relic around her neck. It was like the whole universe was on pause, waiting for the choice of a single soul to seal the continuation of fate. With her eyes fixed on the relic, Kayla felt a wave of understanding wash over her. She had been chosen for something much bigger, not by accident but because of her lineage. She was the key to restoring the world's balance. Her legacy was older than she could imagine. But at the same time, she knew the gods made no compromises. There would be no turning back after her choice. "The choice is yours, Kayla," the temple's deep voice rang out once more, reverberating through her bones. "You have the power to shape the future, or destroy it all. Power, or sacrifice." The words echoed, clearer now than ever before. Kayla looked at Arian, and for a brief moment she saw not just the mercenary by her side, but a true ally who had shared so many battles, pains, and losses with her. Arian had made her own choice, and Kayla knew that in a strange way, they were both on the same path. Arian had chosen to follow the sacrifice, not out of weakness, but out of love and loyalty to what was right. She wasn't afraid to lose anymore. Not anymore. And that's when Kayla made her choice. The sacrifice wasn't just a personal loss. It was a chance to save something way bigger than power itself. She knew power could consume her soul, but the sacrifice could restore balance to the world, stopping the shadows from taking the last bit of light. The decision was clear now. She was ready to walk this path. With newfound confidence, Kayla placed her hand on the relic and said firmly, "I choose the sacrifice. I choose the legacy." The relic glowed bright, almost like it was recognizing her choice. The runes around the altar started glowing with golden light, lighting up the room and pushing back the darkness that had taken over the temple. The mist faded away, and a sense of peace filled the space, like the temple itself had accepted her decision. The weight Kayla had been carrying vanished. The power of her legacy transferred into something bigger than herself. And for the first time, she felt like her fate wasn't just hers anymore, but everyone who depended on her. Arian stepped up to Kayla, and the two exchanged a look of mutual understanding. No words were needed. They both knew that, by choosing the sacrifice, Kayla was not just saving the world's future but also preserving the honor of her lineage and the peace that would come from her choice. "You made the right choice, Kayla," Arian said, giving her a gentle smile, a look of respect. "Now the legacy will be restored." As the golden light surrounded Kayla, she felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders, but at the same time, an even greater responsibility settled on her. The journey was far from over. What she had chosen now was only opening the door to the future. She knew the world would still need her strength, her sacrifice. But now she was ready for whatever came next. And so, with the relic glowing in her chest, Kayla knew the real battle was about to begin. But there was no more fear in her heart. Not anymore. The power of choices was in her hands, and she was ready to fight till the end to protect everything that mattered. The future was now in the hands of those who chose to make a difference. Kayla's choice wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a rebirth. With every decision she made, a new reality began to take shape, like the lines of time were weaving together, and the shadows of ruin were finally fading. In that moment, she understood that true power wasn't about strength or domination, but about choosing what was hardest. The legacy she carried wasn't just a symbol of power, but of responsibility, love, and protecting what mattered most. The balance between light and dark, between what could be destroyed and what could still be saved. Kayla's journey didn't end with her choice. It wasn't the end, but a new beginning. The sacrifice she made was just one step in a bigger journey, one that would keep pushing her limits, testing her courage and her faith. But now she wasn't alone. Arian was by her side, ready to face the challenges ahead, and together, they were not just the last resistance against the forces of darkness, but the embodiment of hope that could never be extinguished. As the temple closed behind them, like it was absorbing the last energy of the past, Kayla felt a deep calm in her heart. The future was now shaped by her choices, and she was ready for whatever came next. She knew the true battle for the fate of the world was still to come, but with her renewed determination, nothing could stop her. The legacy of the Guardians of the Bond, restored, was no longer based on a lost lineage or relics from an ancient time. It was the very essence of humanity, to fight, to choose, to sacrifice, to preserve what is good, even in the face of the toughest odds. She looked at Arian, who, with a smile of understanding, pointed toward the temple exit. The sky outside was already starting to light up with the first rays of dawn. The end of a dark night, the beginning of a new day. The true victory was never in the final showdown, but in the choices made along the way. And so, with courage, they walked together to the next step of their journey. The cycle of the legacy was just beginning, and the stories of Kayla and Arian would be remembered for generations as symbols of hope, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle against the forces that wish to plunge the world into darkness. With a heart full of determination, Kayla knew the fight for the future would continue, but what mattered was that, with every step, she would move forward knowing that, in the end, the legacy she chose to leave behind would be a beacon for all who still sought the light. If you liked this story, don't forget to drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next video.